All right, guys. Thanks for listening to our royalty-free music. You kind of have a limited menu of music choices when you're doing this stuff because of copyright laws, and I'm scared to death of the government. So I try to find some cheap, free songs to play for you at the beginning there. But before we get started, some housekeeping. I'm going to be talking with Megan Lee, who you typically see on this show at the Beacon Center's event on Tuesday next week at the City Club in downtown Nashville. They do this monthly happy hour, young professionals happy hour. I'm showing you the Eventbrite page right now. It's usually a good time. I go even when I'm not talking. So if you're in Nashville and want to hear more about the Pamphleteer, kind of how we got started, how we decide what to cover, and where challenges we've had, issues we see in general local media landscape. That'd be a good time to hear that. So that's that. One thing I want to do today before I bring on Charles Mayfield, who is our special guest this week, I like to start these things off with thought bubbles, if you will. And one of those thought bubbles this week is around the language that we frequently see used, be it by politicians, it really in any capacity. This stuck out to me. This is Walter Kern on Twitter noting this plaque that he found in Wheatland, Montana, honoring some Vietnam veterans. And what stood out to him, Walter is a novelist and writer, so I guess he has a particular eye for this kind of thing. What stood out to them was kind of the unwieldy prose. It didn't feel like it came from a committee. So I'm gonna read it, and it's just I think we're more used to seeing legalistic kind of vapid language on public displays, and this is kind of a counterpoint to that. This memorial was erected in memory of the young individuals who went to war as kids and lost their youthful dreams and some of their lives for a cause, freedom and honor, and came back as men with the horrors of war instilled in every fiber of their being, and were never given the respect and honor they so dearly deserved from the public or United States government. So, I mean, that's a fairly heavily charged statement, something that were you to put it through a committee, I doubt it would come out that way. They'd probably sterilize it a little bit, make it more neutral sounding, and not incriminating of the U.S. government in this instance, probably. God will one day judge our actions. Until then, he will shine on the lives of each veteran now and forevermore, because he was with each of them in Vietnam. He's the only one that truly knows what they went through and are living with every day. It's kind of been a persistent theme, something that we talk about frequently in our daily newsletter, which if you're not subscribed to, then you must. I'm going to put that on the ticker now. Is language and the importance of language. I mean, language forms the boundary of thought. If we're confined to speaking in certain ways, it's a kind of an overwrought point. And I guess the term Orwellian and doublespeak and those kind of things capture that idea fairly well. But if we allow our language to be tamped down and removed in this instance of emotion or any feeling or assertion of the truth in the face of untruth, then I mean you're not equipped with the tools to challenge whatever prevailing orthodoxy is overwhelming you. And that this will kind of merge well with what I talk with Charles about, because a lot of his work is kind of re-adjudicating the health industry and what we define as health. In particular, his work is with skincare products. Another good point, on another elaboration on that point, is just kind of the ubiquity. Here's a tweet I'll put up. So we get all kind of fancy tools on this thing. I like to whip them out. Sanitized, meaningless corporate PR speak is now so ubiquitous that people think it's how you are supposed to write or say anything. Research papers, essays, public remarks, Instagram posts, love letters, book songs, poems. Some people probably write in their diaries like that. I think the diary part is the most damning part of that. I for anyone that has aspirations to writing or messes around with writing, you kind of inhabit the prose style or whatever style of who you're reading at that moment. I remember in college, I got obsessed with Charles Dickens. And whenever I sat down to write, I would end up writing these kind of like convoluted Charles Dickens-esque stories. And that's certainly true, as Paige points out in that tweet, of of um, of just general rhetoric I think a lot of people are kind of ingesting more PR speak than they are any creative fiction or stylistic prose that deals more artfully with some of this stuff. So that's my thought bubble for today. So think on that. I'm going to bring up Charles. Nod if you're ready. I can see you down there in the studio. I'm going to bring up Charles Mayfield. Charles runs Farrow Life. Before you get up here, Charles, I'm going to pull up your website just so people can get familiar. And Charles, we've written about Charles's business before. Before this stream, in honor, I put some of Charles's product on my face. It's amazing. I use it daily. So let's go ahead and bring Charles up. Hey, Charles, thanks for joining me.
Davis, great to see you, man. How you doing?
Good. So for those that don't know, tell us about. We'll get to kind of your origin story, because I always think that you're. The way that you discovered the product is pretty compelling. Well, maybe we start there. How did you discover that lard was useful as a topical, skincare product?
Well, let's start first with how in the world do you not have one of these Nashville musicians scoring a Pamphleteer specific intro song for you? I'm flabbergasted.
We'll work on that. Bad idea, actually. I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, man. I've actually got a couple of musicians that are testing my product now. We're going to do some PR work with them, and I know one of them's out of Nashville, and so if that goes well, I'll make an intro.
Great.
Yeah. So interestingly, Davis, I would say that I've rediscovered the utility of healthy lard, not only for skincare. It's great for many things, but gosh, if you just look back to the turn of the century, everybody knew what lard was. It was the preeminent cooking fat at the turn of the century. But yeah, Farrow is really a convergence of. I've got my dog underneath the table here. He's biting at me. Sorry. It's really a convergence of. I've sort of lived a number of different careers. One in health and fitness. One in regenerative farming, and then one in sort of culinary cooking. I've co-authored a number of cookbooks in the paleo space, and we handcraft all of our creams, which is really how you ought to make, creams. It's
I saw you did a video of that on Instagram. I was gonna where you use like the icing pipers, I noticed.
Oh yeah. We're still small scale, so we're like a pastry piping bag. We still hand fill all the jars.
Yeah.
And so it's really an amalgamation of those three things. I had the tipping point event. We talk about this a little bit on the website. I got a particularly nasty sunburn. With skincare, you've got sort of two different types of skin ills. You've got acute conditions, and then you've got chronic conditions. And I would say that I would put sunburn at the top of the most frequent and common acute skincare problems. And I got a particularly nasty one, July 5th of 2019. I will not forget the date. And it was really sort of out of an act of desperation. I came home. It was late at night. I'm in a small town in East Tennessee. And so, outside of the Walmart, the stores were closed. And I had been, for a number of years, I had been pasturing pigs, selling the meat, staving the back fat, and tinkering quite a bit, but, rendering the lard, playing around with soap, playing around with all sorts of things. But I cooked with it. And so I have since done the sort of mental journey backwards to figure out why in the world I thought about doing this. But I had this jar of lard in my refrigerator, which for your listeners, you don't have to keep it there, but I chose to. And yeah, in a sheer act of desperation, I was like, well, it sort of makes sense. Why not lather up with some lard? And sure enough, I put it on. This is late at night on a whatever, I think it was a Wednesday or Thursday. And it was amazing. Within a matter of minutes, and I put on a pretty heavy coat, and my skin literally just absorbed it. Like in a matter of minutes, it was topically gone.
Really?
And so that yeah, it was fantastic. Our skin is called our second stomach. It's our largest organ. It eats things, and so for anyone that's ever had a close brush with poison ivy, you're well aware of how your skin can consume oils. That's what it is. It's the oil from the poison ivy plant that gets on your skin, and voila. And so yeah, put it on that night. Woke up the next morning. Still burned, but felt pretty good. Put it on again. And so two applications. And, Davis, in a matter of, I think it was maybe 2 days or 3 days, my sunburn was gone.
Right.
And I thought that was fantastic. I've had, this decade plus in sort of the paleo nutrition, tinker with what you eat. And so you sort of learn when something happens. Most commonly with my background, it was, we do like an elimination diet. And so at the end of the 30 or 60 day period of time, you start to reintroduce a singular food. And so I've learned to pay attention. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, I monitored my skin. Again, I didn't put any more on. I monitored my skin fairly closely, and I never peeled. And again, for your listener, everyone knows this story. You always peel, especially when the nastier the sunburn, the quicker you peel. And when that didn't happen, that just light bulbs started going off. And so, as I'm prone to do, I got in the kitchen and got on the Google and how do you make skin cream and fast forward to we launched in January of 22. We say the lard works in mysterious ways. We can sort of talk about a little bit about why that's the case.
So I've got the skin food here. This is the one for general body, and like the ingredients are lard, tallow, leaf lard, which I mean we've talked about this before. Leaf lard is like the fat lining of the organs, right?
Leaf lard is the pig equivalent to tallow. Tallow is rendered visceral fat. Right. From a ruminant, most commonly a cow, but yeah.
And then some honey.
Yep. That's so you got our unscented. Yep. That's our unscented. We've got I've got some right here on my desk. I keep it nice and handy.
Nice. Well, I pulled it from the bathroom. I don't keep it on my desk, but
well, I have one on my desk and one in my bathroom and one in my kitchen. And
okay.
So
well, one thing I've been using it for lately is I was out on a buddy's farm like a couple of weekends ago, and I think I got chiggers or bug bites or something, just some itchy thing on my legs. And so like it got so it would wake me up at night. So I'd just get up, rub some of this on it. It'd be like sated in a couple of minutes, and I'd go back to sleep. But it's like a pretty, I don't know, it's a pretty remarkable little product you got here.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm pulling on this thread. I'm not a researcher, these sciencey, researchy people. It's just
I'm not either. Yeah,
I'm sort of a
same.
Learn by doing.
Yes, exactly.
And but I am convinced. I am absolutely convinced that 90% of itching. Okay, so you got chiggers or a mosquito bite or a sunburn will itch, right? In the days following a big sunburn. I'm convinced that 90% of the itching is because most people are walking around with just horrendously dry skin. And when your skin is dry, as the chigger bite or the mosquito bite, or I just got bit by a tick the other day, as that wells up on your skin, it's stretching your skin. And it's that stretching of dry skin. Think about at a microscopic level, it's cracking, it's doing lots of things. I have had similar results with our product on chiggers, on mosquito bites, on, again, any of these acute skin issues. the itching virtually goes away. And so I think itching is a byproduct of dry skin.
Is like our skin issues generally reduced? I mean, you mentioned bug bites and dry skin exacerbating them. Is like generally the strategy or the goal of a skincare product to like make your skin more moist? What's the term? I don't know what to retain more moisture. Is that always a positive thing?
I like to say feed the skin. I mean, it wants to eat things, right? And part of the problem with industrial skincare is, first of all, they're using the wrong fats. It's, if you're lucky, it's like a plant-based fat, coconut oil, shea butter, something like that, which is fine, but we're not a plant.
Right.
But on the more nefarious side of that formula are seed oils, industrial sludge, petroleum derivatives. Petroleum jelly is terrible for our skin, but it's ubiquitous.
You mean like that, right?
What's that?
Gasoline is petroleum
jelly. Oh yeah. It's a petroleum derivative, and so, but yeah, the goal of any skincare product should be to nourish the skin, and that should be the singular goal. Our skin. Bless our hearts, how I don't want to get in an argument as to how old our species is, but we've got a pretty good strategy on skin maintenance, historically, and I would even argue this is sort of the beauty of our product up until the last probably 100 years. Most humans, and I use that term deliberately, most humans, if they were lucky, were in contact on at least a weekly basis with the visceral fat of an animal, because we would hunt, we would gather, we would butcher, we would slaughter the hog in the fall and so you're eviscerating this animal, you're passing things around, men, women, children. This was a shared communal.
So you would passively get animal fat just on with their hands, and because you just didn't, soap was not as easily, you couldn't go to the store and buy soap. You were just kind of like, spread. What I find with your stuff is, like, to clean my hands of it, I just run it through my hair.
It's in my hair right now. I love it as a pomade. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, why lard? We can jump over there real quick. So pigs and humans share so much biology. So for your listeners that don't know this, we train our surgeons on pigs, right? When you're cutting skin and learning how to sew organs back together and connect this and do that, we use pigs for that. And I'll take it a step further. I've got a good friend, Phil Ovadia. He's a heart surgeon. I fix hearts. He'd be a great interview for you. Okay. He's a heart surgeon. Yeah, I'll introduce you to. But he's a heart surgeon. I was on his podcast sometime last year. I think it was in March of last year, and I sort of pushed him. I was like, you trained on pigs, right? He's like, oh yeah. He's like, I did a surgery last week and I took the valve of a heart of a pig and used it to repair the valve of a heart in the human. Wow. So the biology is a spot on match. Here's the problem. And this gets into the agricultural piece, which is arguably the most prideful side of my business, is because you have to raise a healthy, happy, pasture-based, well-fed, I call it a one bad day animal. You have to, especially with pigs, because they're a monogastric animal. They're just like humans. In the alternative skincare market, most of the players in the market, if not all of them, are tallow-based, and tallow's fantastic. You read the ingredients. We use it in our product. I like tallow. We say the lard works in mysterious ways. Tallow comes from a ruminant. And a ruminant, cow being the most common, a ruminant species metabolizes, stores energy, eats and consumes things differently than we do. It's got a multi-chambered stomach. A cow's, I think, got 7 chambers, including in the rumen. Deer have a 4-chambered stomach, and so what a cow eats and how that nutrition, good or bad, ultimately is metabolized and stored in their fat, both visceral and subcutaneous, is very different than a pig. A pig is with a pig, if it eats something or it's in a poor environment, that's going to manifest in its fat.
And pigs will eat anything.
Very well.
And pigs will eat
yeah. Well, yeah, they will. They're an omnivore. They're arguably the ultimate omnivore, because I've seen pigs eat some wild stuff, and again, there's two sides of that coin. That's fantastic, because pigs are highly adaptive to multiple environments. I mean, pigs are everywhere around the world, short of like Antarctica, these really, really cold spots, but even cold areas, they inhabit. So that's a good thing. When you put them over here into this industrial market where they really, I mean, it's kind of like humans. They don't give a shit what they. Maybe I shouldn't use curse words on your. But I mean, I've seen videos. They take all this throwaway food in the wrapper. Microplastics is sort of a thing now. We've made it a thing, but they'll take all this wrapped up, spoiled or about to go out of date food, and they'll grind it up and they'll feed that to industrial pigs. Well, all that microplastics, they're consuming that kind of stuff. You should not eat store-bought pork, and if you do, at least trim the fat off that animal. It's not great. Now it's better than a box of Wheaties or or Pop-Tarts, but
what do you feed your pigs mostly?
We fed a non-GMO, soy-free diet. It's got corn in it. There's a camp of people over here that get into the polyunsaturated fatty acid argument with regards to what you should feed pigs. And if you feed them a high, what's called PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acid, if you feed them a high PUFA diet, which is soy, there's an argument about corn, then it increases the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids in the pig. And so we fed a freshly milled non-GMO. I drew the line. You can go get organic, but I drew the line at non-GMO. That means it's not getting sprayed with pesticides that are really bad pesticides. Glyphosate being number one, and so and soy free. So there's a snow pea that they use as a substitute for soybeans. There's a lot of good protein in those, and so you want to get the macronutrients right.
The goal being to try to get the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6s in the pork in the pig is close to 1-to-1, right? Or is that the ideal ratio?
Yeah, well, the ideal ratio, there's different camps on this. I'd say anything under 1-to-10, 1-to-15 is pretty damn good. 1-to-1's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, the best grass finished, perfectly fed beef on the planet's like a 1-to-3, 1-to-4.
Okay.
But on the flip, and I know I said beef and we're talking pork, but along the same thread, pork is the same way. And there's another piece to that too. It has to do with diet, but it also has to do with their environment, right? Because you'll see, again, you go to the store, there's organic fed this and non-GMO that, and the one that drives me crazy is vegetarian fed chickens. Chickens are another. Oh yeah, have you never been to the store and seen vegetarian eggs on the store shelves? Oh yeah. Well,
the chickens are fed a vegetarian diet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which again, they're an omnivore, so you can totally feed a chicken a vegetarian diet and it will not thrive, but it will exist.
Right.
but yeah, oh yeah, you can fetch a hefty premium at Whole Foods for those vegetarian fed eggs.
That's I haven't seen that. Maybe I should go out more.
Yeah, and so back to the environment. So yes, what you feed the pig matters.
Of course.
Also, the environment the pig lives in matters. I tell people all the time, if you and I, Davis, had to hang out for 60 days in a locked closet, right, and they fed us filet mignon and chopped salad, the finest foods in the land, but we had to live in a closet with hardly any sunlight. We had to pee in the corner, and you know, uh, we would come out of that closet not very healthy, right?
Right.
Despite a great diet, so
Of
to
course.
speak. And so, and pigs again, they like to root. So they're getting the majority of their sustenance from the feed, right? But they're also augmenting and supplementing that. They'll go, oh, there's a grub worm, I'm going to eat that up, or I'm going to go root around and find an old acorn. And of course, a pig probably ingests, in a pasture environment, is probably ingesting, a pound or two of dirt every year. And of course, all the microorganisms in the dirt. I should use the word soil. Dirt's not the best term, but that's their multivitamin, right? The pasture and the landscape is their multivitamin. And then in addition to that, you've got to move them frequently. We would rotate our pigs to a new paddock, is what we call them. We rotate them every week. And so, because poop builds up and urine builds up, and pigs are also destructive, they'll root. And so you want that massaging of the landscape, but you don't want it to be overburdensome. And so we would constantly move them around, keep them off of their own excrement, and then, give it 10 weeks and you can come right back to the same patch of land with the pigs, because all of that, it's toxicity when it's over concentrated, the manure and the urine.
Right.
You see this with these industrial pork houses. They got these manure lagoons, and they concentrate all this manure, and it becomes toxic, and so it's a classic example of one of the many things that's wrong with the industrial food world is we take what in nature is this tremendous asset of like organic matter in the form of manure, and we concentrate it and make it toxic rather than spreading it out on the land and letting all the soil microbes do their work and all that. So that was a long answer, but
have you seen those like 10-story pork processing facilities that they're building in China? They're like these skyscrapers where they're just like packing them full of pigs. It's crazy. I don't want to pull up a picture because I don't want anyone to get too depressed on the stream. But my next question was going to be, so you do all this in the service of producing high quality fat as opposed to meat, right? Like the primary goal of your the food.
Flip it.
So for meat then.
Well, you raise an animal to eat it, right? And so, yes, Farrow starts with raising healthy animals to consume as meat.
I see.
And then, and so if you've ever butchered a pig, pigs are very good at metabolizing and storing and creating subcutaneous fat, belly fat, back fat, and so. Unfortunately, in today's food world, there is not as great a demand for animal fats, and so effectively, I'm using a waste product. If you really wanted to call it, I don't like calling it that, but in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a waste product because the consumer market for animal-based fat products, or even cooking, McDonald's infamously, French fries were cooked in beef tallow, I think until the early 90s. They used to cook in beef tallow, and they don't do that anymore. And so the market for pasture-based animal fat at the consumer end of the the market has waned, and so yeah. Now we're not raising our own pigs right now. I'm starting to source from a couple of other farms in the southeast that raise pigs the right way. They share my conviction for pastured pork and feed them right and rotate them around and all that. And I long for the day, Davis, where it's hard for me to get my hands on the ingredients I need to make my product. That would be a great day for me, because more people have opened their eyes to truly the world life-changing benefits of these fats.
It's interesting because there's the whole anti-seed oil movement, I guess is what you would call it, that kind of dovetails into all these different things, like using animal-based fats to cook with. It's pretty insane. I mean, to think about what they did with industrial seed oils, taking them from use as lubricants in factories, and then they found a way, they discovered that humans could ingest them. And so they just started selling them as replacements for butter and lard and tallow. And I mean, it's, yeah.
Well, and ironically, Crisco was actually born out of the candle and soap industry. Procter and Gamble started. So Procter and Gamble wanted to. This is in the late 1800s. Procter and Gamble made soap and candles, and they wanted to be the first company to. Excuse me. You mentioned soap earlier. Used to could. You would go to the local. Used to could. You go to the local pharmacy, and you would request a bar of soap, and they would cut it for you off of this big block. So soap manufacturers back then would make a huge block of soap,
right? Sell
it to the local pharmacy, and they would distribute it by the block. And so they wanted to start making the individual, the ivory soap. They wanted to make that. At the same time, there was a price fixing situation with the lard and tallow lobby. I think it was out of Chicago, Illinois at the time. And so it's like, well, we got to lower our costs. And so they figured out how to repurpose cottonseed oil. Cotton was obviously a big product back then, still is, but so they figured out how to extract cottonseed oil from the seed, and they scaled up, bought a bunch of mills in Texas, and at the turn of the century, so they're making soap and candles out of cottonseed oil. Mm-hmm. At the turn of the century, what happens? Electricity and the light bulb. And it's like, oh, the candle market's not looking too hot. What are we going to, we've spent all this money and bought all these cotton mills. What are we going to do with it? And so this German scientist figured out how to hydrogenate cottonseed oil, make it shelf stable, and ingestible by humans. I love that term, ingestible, not nutritious, not healing, but ingestible. And so, at the turn of the century, I think 1913 was maybe the earliest, ads I've found on Crisco. They bleach it white. Because what was the preeminent cooking fat at the turn of the century? Yeah. It was lard. Right. And if you've ever seen a tub of lard, it is white. And so they bleached it white. The ad campaigns and, all the New York this and the Wall Street Journal that. And next thing you know, everyone's using this cottonseed oil, and it's just gotten worse since then. I think we're just now scratching the surface on the ultimate impact that these seed oils are having on us. There's a big hullabaloo now about sunburn and how seed oil consumption, and we talked about this at the top of the show. So the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids in these oils is just absurd. So you've got this hyper amount of omega-6 fatty acids. They also oxidize very easily, and it creates all these free radicals in your body. They're just toxic for us, right. and it's in everything now.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There is a theory that floats around online, and like you said, I am more of a, trial and error type person. Like I fail miserably, and then I learn from that. So one thing in particular is with like using sunscreen. I haven't used sunscreen in probably 5 years at this point, but I also don't get sunburn. If I do get sunburn, it's never as bad as it used to be, and I pin that down a lot to my diet, which has been, I in the past 4 years been more disciplined about purely eating, high quality meat or stuff directly from the ground. And I don't know. I've seen people talk about how what you just said, omega 6, omega 3 imbalances make it more difficult for the body to synthesize vitamin D when the sun hits the skin. And it results in some inefficiency that just kind of like clogs up that process. Um,
Yeah, I can close my eyes right now, and I can still smell the Panama Jack tanning oil that my father would. My mom's from Mobile, Alabama. In fact, I was just down in Dauphin Island with the kids, but I can close my eyes and smell that coconutty Panama Jack oil.
right.
So when I was a youngster, this was back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Um, we would use oils. And so there's a couple things. One is we have an infatuation with the sun,
Of
right?
course.
Everyone wants to be tan, and we've got all these swimming pools, and everyone can go to the beach. Thank God we got this amazing society now where people can have the free time and the freedom to go relax by a body of water, right? Historically, as a species, from call it 11 o'clock in the morning until about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if we were outside, we were covered.
Yeah.
We were working in the fields, maybe, but we had big hats on. We had this respect for the sun historically. It's, they're trying to turn it into a fear. But this gets into part of the problem. So sunscreen. I think it's a false flag. I think it's giving people an overconfidence that, hey, if I just cover myself in this, and look at the numbers, Davis. SPF 100, 120. These didn't even exist 20 years ago. And so if you look at if you throw on a graph incidence of skin cancer next to SPF, next to use of sunscreen, if you throw all of those three on a graph together, those lines look the same. Increase in use,
Hmm.
SPF has gone up, and so have all the incidents of skin cancer. And so one of the things I tell folks, I did this with the kids when we were Dauphin Island. I made in fact, I've got one of the samples here. I'm tinkering around with like a sun balm, I'm going to call it, using some zinc oxide and just some animal fat. But, when it got to be about 11 or 12 o'clock, we would go home. We would get in a cooler area, shade. We would have lunch, and if we went back out in the sun until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, put the hat on. We've got all this amazing technical gear now. These super lightweight shirts that just dry off
Yeah.
like that, and so it's not the sun that's the problem. It's our lack of respect, and again, this false security that I'm
Sunscreen.
smearing this stuff on my skin. It's protecting me.
It kind of
Um,
dulls your senses a little bit. You're kind of like arrogantly thinking that you can just slather yourself with sunscreen, and then you're out there just getting blasted by radiation from the sun. Like it's not, you know, um, I think of that as like dulling the senses. So one thing that I want to make sure we talk about uh, before we finish this is, so not like your product is a topical skincare product, but something that we've talked about and I've heard you talk about before is diet's importance in the
mhm.
health of your skin. So like a lot of skin issues, like a bug bite and stuff that I was talking about earlier, that's obviously kind of a topical problem. But some people have eczema, some people have psoriasis, various skin afflictions. And so what would you say like the approach to diet that would blend well with your products, or how does diet play into this stuff?
Sure. Yeah, great question. We talked earlier, acute and chronic, two
Right.
sides to the coin. And I would say that all chronic skin conditions have some sort of underlying dietary. I'm gonna put it. This is probably not 100% accurate, but okay, 99% of skin issues, chronic skin issues, fall under this autoimmune sort of spectrum.
Right.
And autoimmunity, for your listeners that don't understand, is I'm ingesting something that my body doesn't agree with. Okay, so we can talk gluten, we can talk this, we can talk that. In terms of dietary, there's a couple of recommendations. Depending on how chronic and how severe your conditions are, I would say number one, reduce or eliminate sugar. That is you certainly not added sugar. To get added sugar out of your diet. If you want to have an apple or some fresh berries or whatever the case may be, but good Lord, they're throwing sugar in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, next to that is eat real food. If it comes in a box with a bunch of ingredients, it's probably not good for you. We haven't touched on it too much, but it's worth mentioning. We have this microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the sunscreens. Those chemicals in sunscreen that keep the water-based skincare from going rancid. Water is what feeds bacteria, and so those chemicals, not only do they disrupt our endocrine system, but they also napalm effectively kill all of the natural bugs that live in and on our skin. Our gut's the same way, right? We've got this microbiome in our gut. These bugs, for your listeners, you've got about 5 to 7 pounds of microscopic organisms living in and on your body. Now, I'm not here to freak anybody out, but that's just the way it is, right? And so it's amazing. It's gnarly, but it's also fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating. The germ theory and all that fun stuff. And so, do we know why they're there? No, we're learning, but they're there, and they wouldn't be there by accident, right? And so, the preservatives. It's the same with skincare as it is. There's so much correlation between what we put in our mouth and what we put in our skin. So that same box of food with all these ingredients that keep it from molding and going bad,
Mm-hmm.
when you ingest those compounds, they're disrupting the natural microbiome in your gut. And then if they disrupt it enough, and this gets sort of into the grains and some of the nefarious impacts of like a gluten, which is a protein, then they can disrupt our gut so much that it's called leaky gut. And so our small intestines is where the nutrients that go in our mouth ultimately make their way into our body. And it's a fascinatingly dynamic system, right? It's what's called a semi-permeable membrane. And I don't want to get too far afield here, but semi-permeable meaning things can come through it, but they have to be properly broken down.
Mm-hmm.
And when you eat some of these compounds and proteins and various things that disrupt our gut, they can cause the gut lining to become permeable, which means things get in our body now that our body does not recognize. And so a healthy gut keeps everything out of your body until it's ready to come in. An unhealthy gut will allow certain things in, like for your listeners, I don't know if they can see this, but if I had these two pins, yeah. So these are proteins, right? These are the protein building blocks of all things. Everything's got proteins, and so this is the single strand proteins of an almond, right? Just as an example, or a peanut. Everybody's got these damn peanut allergies now. So here are two single strand proteins of a peanut. Well, until they're properly broken down in the gut, they're connected. Mm-hmm. And if the gut is permeable, then this thing right here can slip through the gut, the lining of the small intestines, and get into our bloodstream. Mm-hmm. And this is an alien to our immune system. It gets in the bloodstream, and our immune system is going, what the hell is that? Because it's not this. It's not a single strand protein. And so what does our immune system do? It starts fighting. And so if you look into sort of allergies and obviously the uptick of allergies over the last 20 years, and this is a lot of different things, but ultimately the foods that we eat, such a complicated question, but the foods that we eat impact the gut.
Yeah.
They impact the microbiomes in there. So
I know.
Kill sugar, get rid of sugar, eat real whole foods. And then when you want to step up to like, the big times, focusing on real animal-based protein and fat, beef, pork, chicken, and the requisite fats that come along with that.
I used to have eczema growing up, and like over the past 4 years, I've totally eliminated my eczema. I never have it, and it's totally 100% due to diet. And one other thing I want to mention about you're talking about the gut microbiome. In today's newsletter, when I was introducing you, I mentioned one thing that RFK mentioned in his podcast interview with Joe Rogan. And the quote is, in the 1960s, when I was a kid, only 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Autism went from 1 in 10,000 in my generation to 1 in 34 kids who have autism, and half of those cases are full blown. And one of the more, interesting theories I've heard about what has led to the increase in instances of autism has to do with the gut microbiome, and how if children are not fed or are medicated in such a way that it destroys their microbiome, then they end up with these stomach issues, and it kind of overpowers their other sensory input, so they're kind of delayed in that way. But yeah, I think it seems to me like understanding of the microbiome is kind of the cutting edge of health science right now. It's something that's fairly recently come into vogue, right? Am I just myself coming aware of it, or has it gained more prominence in medical literature and understandings of this stuff?
It's getting there, Davis. We know less about the microbiome than we do about space, and but there's a global microbiome project going on right now. Now it's more predicated on the environmental microbiome, the bugs in the ground. And, I mean, I forget how many microorganisms there are in a teaspoon of dirt, of soil, but it's a lot.
More than the stars.
Yeah, right? I believe that's accurate. But yeah, no, you're not late to the game. The problem we're going to have is the same problem we deal with across the board. These companies, there's 4 or 5 companies that control 85% of the meat in the United States. There's 4 or 5 companies that control, 85% of the products on the shelf in a grocery store. There's 4 or 5 companies that control, 80% of the skincare industry, right? There's this massive hyper concentration of power and influence, and candidly, they're all poisoning us, right? Because bad food feeds big pharma. Bad food that is subsidized by our government, right, feeds big pharma that sends a lot of money to our government. And this isn't. The government has its place, but good Lord, it needs to get out of the way when it comes to some of this stuff. And so
I think the most radicalizing thing that I've certainly learned in recent years has been how misguided the FDA and the Department of Agriculture are with regards to diet. I mean, there was like this study that came out. If you applied the formula, it was like it said a bowl of Fruity Pebbles or something was healthier than a pound of ground beef. Yeah, I mean, but that's the kind of studies that they're producing. Whatever information.
But there's no money in big pharma for a pound of ground beef.
Yeah. True.
Our neighbors, when I was growing up, there was an older couple, and my mom moved to Athens, Tennessee, to raise her family with her husband. So she's from Mobile, and this woman and her husband, she was really like a second mother to me. She was older. But they were wonderful. And Miss Mary Lee and her husband, I'll never forget this. Her husband was diagnosed, I remember this was 1986 or 87, was found out he had type 2 diabetes. And of course, back, it's like, what the hell is that? That woman, so Buddy ended up living another 22 years.
Mm-hmm.
She treated his diabetes by cooking for him, and she kept his blood sugar low by preparing meals that were, not high in carbohydrates. And, I sit back and I think about that and I'm like, well, yeah. But if you go to the American Diabetes Association's website, like if you get diabetes now, the recommendations that they make for you are making it worse. 35 grams of carbohydrates per meal, up to 3 meals a day, and then you can have some snacks. Like I don't eat 35 grams of sugar in a week.
Yeah.
And so, and it's that across the board. If I've been tinkering with this carnivore diet now for about 6 months. And we just met in Nashville. We were at that All Health Summit. I saw you there. So Brett Ender, half of the Meat Mafia. Brett had ulcerative colitis, right? Was just grabbing at straws. The medicine they had Brett on before he went carnivore was $40,000 a month.
Wow. What?
The protocol that they had him on to treat his ulcerative colitis was $40,000 a month. He has completely reversed his ulcerative colitis by going carnivore. So you sit here and you go, where's that on the New York Times, front page? Why isn't that being talked about? There's so many people reversing every imaginable chronic disease you can think of by adopting a real foods smarter way of eating, but it's not talked about because there's just so much money in treating sick people.
Yep. All right, Charles, this is we're coming to the end of our time here. Before we go, I want to pull up your website. We've talked about your products at a high level. I do want to show them to everyone here, so I'm going to share. Let's see, how do I do this? There we go. So, yeah, you've just released this voice crack. You've just released this Epic Dermis product.
Man.
I use Face Food. I used it before I got on air here, just and I've got my Skin Food right here. And this stuff I can't vouch for it more. It's kind of weird for two dudes to talk about skincare products, but I mean, hell, when I put it on my face and I go throughout my day, I can feel it on my skin. It feels amazing. I feel great with it on my skin. Never experienced that sensation prior to using your stuff. So I'm a big fan, obviously.
Yeah, I haven't had razor burn in about 3 years, and I had there's the discount code. Thanks,
we got a discount code.
Pamphleteer.
If you guys want to use it, you get 50% off.
I got to do a better job of telling people just how well these products are amazing. And I don't have 50,000 different SKUs, and I don't have an AM. This is part of the psyop in skincare. They want you to have a different cream for morning and night. Somehow your skin, underneath your eyes is different than the skin, around your ears and all that BS. Epic Dermis, that's our new product. So about 6 months after we launched in January of 22, and I was just getting constantly berated. These jars are great. Here's a jar, but it doesn't pack in my purse very well. I can't take it on a plane very well. It doesn't do this, do that. And so we formulated Epic Dermis. It's an only a scented product, and it's an amazing scent. Outdoorsy. It's got a little basil in it. It's got some black spruce. It's got some bergamot, but it's more of a portable, packable. I take it everywhere I go now, and our creams are, this, a little goes a really, really long way. There's no preservatives. There's also no water. It's full fat. And so I can take a little pea-sized, just barely cover the tip of my finger, and I can literally rub it on my entire face or hands and arms. It works great. But listen, I would love for anyone listening to try our products. They are absolutely life-changing, totally kid-safe, mom-tested. It works well for everybody. I mean, diaper rash, baggy eyes. It's really a product for the whole family to try.
For I imagine women get a little more maybe neurotic about their skincare routine. As a guy, you're just like, my skin's dry. I just need something to throw on there. Um, so yeah, it does seem like the skincare industry preys on that kind of like hyper concern over skin. It's a like a part of people's body that they're very concerned with. So it's good. It's good.
Well,
What you're
there.
doing. I'm an advocate of your products.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, well, I mean, industrial skincare products are aging your skin faster
right, of
because that perpetuates their industry, right?
course.
And when you finally throw your hands up, I'm sure there's a plastic surgeon that's more than willing to tuck this and pull that and all that. I mean, it's just all a bunch of crap. Um, I need this. This is the best commercial I can give. I need less of my product now than I did when I started the company because I use it regularly, and it's so good at just feeding your skin that over time
Yeah.
you need. Now in a sunburn situation, lather up, but it just a little goes such a long way. I had one more thing I wanted to add, by the way. Okay, so this is completely unrelated to skincare, but in your intro, I have been doing this, and I'm going to recommend it for all of your listeners.
Okay.
So Walmart has a $5 movie box. It's this big bin in Walmart's, and it's just all the throwaway movies. And I am genuinely concerned about this transition to the digital space with books and movies, and the changing of words and the changing of narratives. And I'll give you one example. I have acquired the movie Tropic Thunder in DVD. Absolutely. And for $5. Yeah. So I have Tropic Thunder on DVD. My children are 8 and 10 years old. I am not showing them that movie now, but in 15 years, when you can't find Tropic Thunder and digitally it doesn't exist anymore, I'll be able to pull that sucker out and say, this is what movies used to. I've got Airplane, I've got Fletch, I've got some just absolute winner movies.
We've talked about Tropic Thunder before. I'm a dude playing the dude disguised as another dude.
Another dude.
All right,
never go full retard.
Charles, thanks for coming on. Like I said, I'll put links in the show notes for this episode to Farrow Life and everything. And yeah, you got a 50% discount here, listeners. So Charles, as always, great chatting with you.
Davis, thank you very much.
I'm sure I'll see you soon next time you're in Nashville. So have a good rest of your day.
You as well, sir. Thanks.
See ya. All right. Well, that was Charles Mayfield with Farrow. We've got a bullpen lined up here. Megan is going to come up next. Megan, we're going to talk about. You ready?
Yeah.
We're talking about SROs in Metro School and how the Metro Nashville public school system has just said no to requests from both council members and parents to install SROs
in elementary schools. So for one, I'm about to go buy like all of Charles' stuff. He sold me. I think people really should take him up on his 50% off deal. I'm about to.
15.
Oh, 15. Oh, I thought he said 50. I was like, how the heck is he going to pull that off? It doesn't matter. I'm still going to buy it all. Huh?
So I'm not trying to bankrupt the guy with the 50.
Sorry. But yeah, so this isn't really that surprising. Well, for MNPS, right? It's pretty par for course. Of course, what they're coming out and saying as far as why they don't want the SROs in the elementary schools is because they don't think that it's good, like that, for elementary age students to have, I guess, that presence. They're allowing it in the high schools and the middle schools, but not in the elementary schools. So we've seen discussions. This is so interesting because, of course, this is a hot button topic now because of what happened with the shooting and legislation that they've been trying to do regarding that type of stuff. But even before the shooting, we already had new legislation coming through during General Assembly to introduce a way to basically place an SRO in every school in Tennessee. They're trying to incentivize schools through grants, which is now they have put into place so that everyone will have an SRO. But it is weird that we're seeing this pushback coming from MNPS. I hope that the parents have get the proper platform to actually reach this head on. I know that Fox 17 has been looking into this type of stuff for over a year, and I'm glad that now it's kind of coming to light so people could battle it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's ironic. You can go to the Gucci store in the Green Hills Mall and they'll have a security guard, an armed security guard there, but like putting them in an elementary school where your most vulnerable people in the community is beyond the pale. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to even comprehend it just because of how insane the like disconnect is between what we're choosing to protect and what we're not. I mean, do you think is the board like using it as leverage to lobby for some other piece of legislation? Are they like caught up in the effort to impose a red flag law, and you think they're talking to lawmakers that are like, don't cave on this because we want to get this? Think something.
I'm uncertain. Again, the people, the reporters at Fox 17 who's been investigating this, I have a feeling they probably know where this is coming from and why. But I think this is mostly being used as just another political cudgel, as we've been seeing. I want to bring up this SRO legislation when it was talked about during General Assembly. It was backed by Leader Lamberth. Okay. And so the day that this was on the floor during committee, Leader Lamberth started to talk about this and in relation to partial solutions for what happened with Covenant. And of course, he was interrupted by Justin Jones, who was on the same committee. I think it's I'm not certain what committee it was, but it doesn't really matter. They were on the same committee together, was interrupted by Justin Jones, who was trying to platform talking about the SRO placement to hijack it and make it about we shouldn't be placing SROs, we should be getting rid of guns. So I'm assuming that that's kind of an extension, a political extension of all of this. I mean, these are, I want to say a quote from Lamberth on that day. He like spelled it out in black and white when he was in the committee, exactly how a lot of people feel, which was, he said, where is this exactly? He specifically said, this bill, hold on. Behind every one of those inanimate objects that I know you hate so much is an evil person that chooses to use it in an inappropriate way. I understand that you want to focus on the item used. I want to focus on things that will actually ensure the safety of our children. That was a quote from Leader Lamberth in response to Justin Jones. I think that we're just seeing an extension of this same political charade now in MNPS. So
yeah, it's honestly pretty hard to believe. But you know, can't call it a surprise. There was a protest this morning in Sumner County, right?
Yes, this was an anti-gun protest. I actually have no intel as to how many people actually showed up to it, but now we're starting to see as we approach this special session that's going to be happening in August. As far as I know, the governor's not backing away from holding it. I know that some people have released letters asking him to reconsider it or to cancel it. We've seen that happening all over the last month, but it doesn't seem like he's about to budge. I've heard some people who have gone in and taken meetings with his administration. It sounds like he's standing pretty firm on the fact that he does want to hold this special session. So now we're going to start to see these types of events like what happened today in Sumner County, where people are going to be coming out in sign of, I guess, solidarity. My biggest, I was talking to some people who are pro 2A in Tennessee, just to get the vibe on like that side of the aisle view of this whole event mess, whatever you want to call it. And it sounds to me that there won't really be any there won't be protests to go up against the protests that we know we're going to see for the anti-gun.
There won't be counter protests.
That's what I was looking for, the term counter protest. So that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're more ready to, if it's going to come to it, they're more ready to take this on by lobbying and through the court system if it comes down to that. They would rather just take it to the courts and test out if it's constitutionally sound for them to do this type of whatever law they might pass. So that's
what over the next couple of days. I mean, the special session's August 15th. It's June 16th. We have 2 full months until this special session. I mean, what are there going to be? I expect more letters from lawmakers like you. I mean,
it sounds like legislators are already getting bombarded now by people who are feeling that their voices are being silenced. Of course, we've seen. So it's interesting. I don't like the term Tennessee 3, but the stuff that happened with the Tennessee 3, we have commented on the fact that it seems to be tapering down. That type of fervor surrounding those representatives is kind of dying. But I have a feeling that might signal, especially when it starts to feel like it's simmering down, is exactly when we usually see people throw some new stuff into this into the mix as far as locally here, if they are part of these anti-gun legislators or whoever is planning all these protests. So I think that you're gonna see more people who feel like they're getting drowned out by the anti-gun narrative reach out privately to their legislators. I don't think we're going to see anybody really coming out holding up any like banner for against these red flag laws, at least not that I know of. So I guess we'll find out. Hopefully it won't be too bad.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to add? You wrote about a bunch of stuff this week. There was the NASCAR track. I think that's going to be in the mayor's race. We went to we were both at the mayor's forum at Fat Bottom on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty good. It does seem like the NASCAR track, that deal might emerge as an issue in the mayor's race as they kind of position themselves as pro or anti. It seems like it's like one of these wedge issues that's going to define whether a candidate's looking after the interest of the basically the tourist industry or trying to make lives better for citizens. That's kind of what it seems like it's being used as a way to dissect that.
So this week during we had a special meeting. The council held one so that they could pass part of the capital improvements items for that budget. Okay, they had to pass it by, I think the due date was the 15th. So they had to hold a special meeting this week. And during that, we saw an amendment introduced. And that amendment basically would have changed the language of where the funds would be, not just language, they would change the ability for the funds that would partially fund this deal with Bristol coming from a different bond. So they were switching what bonds you could use, which would change the language that it would just basically kill the ordinance that has come forward that would seal this Bristol deal. So they were trying to kill it before it even got to third reading. It didn't end up going through. A lot of people there's definitely a narrative that some of these council members are trying to fight that is being pushed throughout the media and by, certain people who are just anti this Bristol deal. And they really want to hear more about what the community thinks and what the Fair Commission and the Fair Board commissioners think and how it looks. And they didn't want to just cut off the conversation by just flippantly saying we're gonna kill this deal without talking through it. So I guess for me, when we're looking at that deal going forward, you're going to hear, I'm assuming, people like Berkeley Allen come out and try to express and explain exactly what is good or bad about this deal so people feel like they understand it a little bit better. Right now, it seems like people just feel angry that they don't feel like they're getting represented.
I also liked what you tweeted out about Sean Parker talking about, what did he call it? Civic bandwidth or something? Civic
bandwidth. So the concept that he was saying, I agree with. He
was just saying that they're tired. Like that. I mean,
yeah. But that's where I was just like, he thought he was so smart when he coined the term civic bandwidth. But he is saying that people are kind of tired, the people who pay attention to these deals and, the local, not just the legislators, but the constituents themselves are just exhausted from all these deals. And so he was calling it, our civic bandwidth is we've reached our limit, and that's why we should just not do any more deals, not do any more. Of course, he also was trying to push through that ordinance where he ended up getting it through after some compromises where they changed the term family so that more people could I guess, live in a dwelling together who aren't related. And he was more than happy to try to ram that through. But, but now everybody's just too tired to deal with the Bristol deal. Now, as far as where people stand on it, I think that people are they're confused about it. And they're also just kind of still agitated about the Titans deal.
I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm just like, let her rip. Let's just, why not? Like I have a hard time. The only thing I can think of to say no is like, no, like, I don't know. I'm just kind of just.
Well, I know at the fairgrounds.
Oh, let's just turn the city into a zoo. That's where it's going.
Yeah. Some people feel like that. I think when I'm listening to and reading some of the comments, especially when you go and listen to the public hearings and you hear people, even during the Fair Board of Commissioners meeting, they had a public hearing where people could step forward and say a few things. And you do get a sense that people, they like the fairgrounds and they want to kind of save it, so this could be a way to do that.
I like the old fairgrounds when the flea market, you felt like you were just like wandering into a kind of a desolate wasteland, and the infrastructure was broken and like the bathrooms barely worked. I don't even know if the toilets flushed, and you go there and you find this like nice wooden coffee table. Felt like you were wandering among it's kind of cool.
It's an experience. So I guess we'll see how people feel about that, but we won't hear more on that until it comes up for third reading. And I've looked over. I don't think it's on for next. I think that they're finishing up the budget next week, and then we'll be looking at this Bristol deal. So
okay, well, thanks a lot. If you guys don't know, Megan does the Nashville section of the newsletter every morning. So a variety. It's kind of state and Nashville stuff. She does the job of about 3 people. So be sure to check out her stuff. She's pretty on the beat about what's going on in the council. Developments at the state level, etc. So yeah, Megan, thanks for coming on. I put the ticker sign up if you're not already. I always have to say this because many of you do not sign up.
So passive aggressive about that. If you're not signed up, sign up. What do you say? What's your tagline? If you're not on the list, get on it.
That's not passive aggressive. That's like, get on the list. All right. Well, thanks, Megan.
Bye.
We'll see you next week. All right. Well, next we have Jared Hollyfield. Jared kind of lobbed a grenade into the cultural discourse this morning with an article titled "There Is No Culture War." And I thought it was a compelling argument. So, Jared, you're up.
I'm just happy that I've got as many views on the story as Justin Jones got votes last night. So
that's
like,
nice.
in 20 minutes, I'm just really happy.
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to pull up the piece real fast and just put it on the screen because I like to do that. So, I mean, first, what is the culture war? I don't think people like have it that I see the term tossed around a lot. I don't see a lot of like honing in on what the culture war actually is. You get into that in this article pretty in depth. So tell us what the culture war is.
So the short answer is everything now. Everything is the culture war. There's really no distinction between policy and these sort of social issues that we're talking about. It didn't start out that way. This was a term that had really been bandied about for a while, but it wasn't until the Bush-Clinton election, like right before that all got started, that James Davidson Hunter wrote a book called Culture Wars. And the way that he basically defines it is we had this massive success with foreign policy and economic policy that kind of culminated in the way that Reagan handled the Cold War and ended it. So if we think back to that Walter Mondale election of 1984 and the disaster that happened in terms of, the big sweep that Reagan had when everybody 4 years ago just thought he was kind of an outsider candidate, that those progressives in the academic fields and in the media fields who pretty much dominated them started to push back a little bit. And what happened there is that caused evangelicals, Catholics, and Orthodox Jews to band together and fight for traditional American values.
Mhm.
So it had a religious context initially. But as time wore on, and a lot of this, as much as I admire the man, was Pat Buchanan's fault, because if anybody here remembers the 1992 Republican National Convention, Buchanan challenged Bush, and he gave a concession speech and then a speech at the RNC supporting Bush and talking about Clinton and how morally corrupt he was. And Buchanan took the culture war and really extended it to everything. So now everything is the culture war. And that's a problem for both sides, because we've seen at the multiplex, we've seen in novels. If you go to Barnes and Noble, pick up a book and it's about a trans Jewish queer cyborg that is like sailing on the ocean or something.
Mhm.
And you're almost playing word salad with identity groups, and movies are the same way. So our culture's cheapened because of the culture war. You have people fighting back that are already in control of these institutions, and then within the conservative realm, you have a group really that almost has Stockholm syndrome, where they know that Christian movies, they know that a lot of these like jingoistic patriot movies aren't necessarily that good, and they kind of like support them anyway. And a lot of times they end up often now doing better than, indie films. And I talk about this in the article. I compare the movie Nefarious to two recent releases, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is about eco-terrorism and endorses it, and the movie that won Sundance this year, 1001, that's about a mother who was recently released from jail and kidnaps her son in Giuliani's New York and community policing and blah, blah, blah.
Sounds
All of these movies are just terrible. And the reason they're terrible is, they're more concerned with the culture war than anything else.
But what's interesting is that when I think the culture war, I think a lot of the right is obsessed with the culture war. But what your article kind of reminded me of is that the left is just as concerned with the culture war, if not more. The common claim is that the right is so obsessed with the culture war that that's all they focus on. But the left is equally, if not more, focused on this stuff as well. Those two films you mentioned are a good example. And I think their like fighting of the culture war is just more embedded in the institution, so it doesn't come across as explicitly as the right has to be when they champion a movie like Nefarious, as you said.
Right, and I make the comparison in the article. Like a movie like Nefarious is throwing pebbles at a tank,
Right.
and these groups have pretty much, they're entrenched in all the major cultural institutions. You can't get a grant as a white man from a nonprofit these days.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to change now that the Starbucks court decision happened, where they found that reverse racism actually was something that existed and ordered the company to pay $23 million to the manager. There might be some precedent there for people to start suing a lot of these nonprofits and granting boards. But by and large, those boards have a certain agenda. I mean, you saw it in documentary film about 10 years ago, and I've written about that before. And now you're really seeing it in narrative film too. And kind of the crazy thing, I didn't get to include this in the article, but I was looking back at a couple of articles in 2012, and there was a Hollywood Reporter article that talked about how movies that have conservative themes tend to do much better at the box office than movies with liberal themes. And they cited Thor, Captain America, The First Avenger, Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, and a bunch of films that came out in that particular year, and compared them to movies that were openly liberal. Those were not movies that were openly conservative. They just had traditional themes. So if you think back to a movie like Captain America, The First Avenger, it's very critical of the government exploiting patriotism, but it also has a very clear set of values. Mm-hmm. And you compare that Marvel movie to a Marvel movie that came out within the past few years of Marvel, where the box office and the reviews are going on the decline. And that movie was much more nuanced, much more three-dimensional than what's coming out of the same studio. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And I think one of the problems is that conservatives in general refuse to engage with culture. And if you look at some of the comments on the article already, they basically don't know how to do anything but meme about LGBTQ issues. There is no like takedown of, hey, your movie is terrible and here's why. It's this movie is about this thing and it's bad, or like Batman had 3 woke moments in it, so it's not worth your time. And it's not contextualizing. There's not really a cultural criticism center on the right for popular culture. And that's a major problem. I mean, you have some great critics like Armand White, who I think it's kind of a contrarian on purpose, and someone like Kyle Smith, but two people can't do that job.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting the responses that it's getting. I'm just looking through the Twitter replies to it right now.
And I will say there is a problem too with the fact that conservatives, especially conservative influencers, they're exploiting this. They're exploiting this anger.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's in their best interest for people not to read, for people not to engage in the culture. So you get somebody making a terrible, by all accounts, by all aesthetic accounts, movie of the right that is anti-woke, and that's like its entire existence is because it's anti-woke. Those people are going to benefit because people aren't reading books, aren't going to go see Hollywood movies and having this discussion about them. They're going to say, go see my movie. This is the first time you'll appear in a theater. And you always see that at a movie theater. Whenever a multiplex is hosting a new movie that's conservative, you'll have all these people that come out and only go see that stuff and then yell about woke Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember going to one about a year ago, and some guy was complaining because the movie got started late because it was one of those special events, and he's like, "Oh, I heard AMC is owned by the Chinese. They don't want to show this movie." It's like, no, okay, like first of all, that stock got traded a long time ago, and the company ownership has changed. But secondly, like, what? No, they don't care about your badly made movie. Like, no one cares. It's a joke.
Yeah.
No one's threatened by this on the left because aesthetically it's so terrible. And
here's
our ethics are challenged because we're endorsing this crap.
So here's the this I think captures what a resistance to the idea would be. Is like, of course, like the Democratic Party and various culture institutions are pushing the LGBTQ plus agenda very aggressively and very assertively. So how would you separate their attempts to wage the culture war there?
I think you froze up a little bit there.
Whoa, yeah, I'm back.
Gotcha.
My connection is unstable, but I think I should be good.
So,
but
I heard the first part of that question.
Yeah. So how would so I mean that's a valid point. The Democrat, like the obsession with people pushing gender ideology is definitely the culture war or part of it. And so like a substantive response to that would be what in this context? Like how do you reconcile the assertion of that with, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, like, because, we're in Pride Month right now. It's less in our face this year than it was last year. But it is very aggressively pushed by people who seem to feel obligated to do so, and it's forced on kids at schools, etc.
Right, and I think that's a very different issue. I mean, whenever I define culture war, I think about movies, books, television. I would say like fashion is included in that in some products, but whenever we're talking about corporate ideologies and whenever we're talking about education, it's not in our best interest to conflate all these issues.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So that's a separate issue. You're speaking specifically to art and the products of culture being not useful tools in the culture war, and that the culture war has absorbed art.
Exactly. And I mean, I think these boycotts, the fact that, we're aware of them and the fact that they seem to be working on one hand is really impressive right now. But on the other hand, especially within the case of like Chick-fil-A and Cracker Barrel, that stuff has been going on a long time. And what it really makes it look like is that conservatives haven't been paying attention.
Right.
What I would say is like, I don't care personally. I think the Pride Month stuff is a joke. And I know a lot of LGBTQ people think the exact same thing. It doesn't sell. I mean, I remember I texted you guys very early in the Pamphleteer's life cycle, like in October at Target. They had a bunch of pronoun mugs for 30 cents in the back they were trying to get rid of. Yeah. Nobody's buying the stuff whatsoever. So the fact that, the story was reported and people made an economic decision, that's great. That's a personal decision. But, the fact that we keep going back to it and we keep being obsessed with it and making memes like whatever the hell you just put up on the screen was. I mean, that dude obviously didn't read the article because I made a comment about that. Why are we so obsessed with it after we point the story out? I mean, there's a big difference of, journalism covers the story. There's nothing else to that. Whenever we're talking about culture, whenever we're talking about the gay kiss in Lightyear or the trans flag in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, that needs to be something that is actually parsed out. This is not a good movie for this reason. And the answer is not, this is not a good movie because it focuses on gay characters. This is not a censorship issue. This is, why is this shoehorned in, and why is it shoehorned in so badly? And why is it so shoehorned in that it's very easy to take out and then market in China or Saudi Arabia? So those are the issues we need to be bringing up, not these stupid memes about how Bud Light and Target are promoting pride. Like, I mean, we know that. We're not buying those products if we don't agree with that. The economics are on that side because most people don't care. And to be quite honest, the boycott of Target and all these other places, it's doing something, but they don't sell enough of these products anyway. Most of the time, they just end up getting donated in their tax write-off.
Right.
So these boycotts are not as effective as people think they are. It's just a lot of noise, and it distracts us from these other major issues. And it really distracts us from putting forward a cogent argument and making culture that, in some ways, actually would influence somebody else and not trick them into going to see a movie like Nefarious does, that, oh, you're seeing a horror movie, but actually, no, it's not a horror movie. It's a conservative movie, very clearly, and that's all that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting point. We've talked about this for, I think, this has been kind of an ongoing thread in our friendship, and it's nice to see you crystallize some of these thoughts, because it is frustrating. On the one hand, you are encouraged to see someone like the Daily Wire enter into, producing films and that kind of thing, because that on the surface, their values align with yours. But if the focus is gonna be on purely reproducing, Hollywood schlock with a slight veneer of conservatism, they're not making a differentiated product. They're doing the same thing that led to Hollywood's increasing irrelevance.
And one thing you'll see now, I mean, I've been talking about this a lot, but the movies that Europe is making right now are the movies that we should be making at this point. France is making movies about these issues that actually do foster a debate. They have three-dimensional characters. A lot of that's one of the reasons that American film by itself is really losing a lot of its cultural clout, is because we're so stuck in this binary mindset. I would love to see the Daily Wire make Dirty Harry and make it as nuanced as Dirty Harry. I think that would be amazing, because Hollywood is certainly not doing that. And then they're shocked whenever something like Top Gun Maverick or something like Avatar does as well as it does.
I think a lot of this stuff is people justifiably looking around, seeing, all this stuff pushed on them in a very disingenuous way. Like you said, no one buys the Pride merchandise, but it's still pushed and sold to you. And like, they don't know what to do about that. So this term, the culture war, has come to encompass this reaction to that. And, I mean, it's a huge problem. And I think a lot of it just has to do with institutional capture.
Yeah. And when was the last time, I mean, outside of a Pride parade, when was the last time you saw somebody wearing Pride merchandise just on the street?
I mean,
like, I've never have in my life, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you do, but like, it's
like a barista who just got fired,
yeah,
because they tried to unionize. I mean, that's what it is. Like, I've just never seen somebody like walking around with a Pride shirt on in June outside of the parade.
Yeah.
I mean, what? It's something that's almost like it's a fake out. Like, here's this thing that's happening, and this is actually what's going on in your schools, and you're so focused on this. And make your memes.
I think that your critics would do well to understand that you are referring specifically to. I'm going to put the article back up. You are referring specifically to the production of film and literature, etc., and how it does not benefit those of us who do not see our values reflected in the art and culture of the U.S. to simply cheaply reproduce things that are explicitly, like, we should, you should strive for high value, high quality stuff, not just cynically appealing to people based on your open signaling of political values, which rarely ends in good art. So
right, and it also goes back. I know you quoted this in a newsletter opening a couple of weeks ago, but Peter Till's speech about diversity that he gave when he won the award from the New Criterion, where it is this sort of vicious circle of like homelessness, but in this case, it's the culture war, and What happens every morning is somebody, posts something that is an infraction on a conservative influencer's Instagram account or TikTok or whatever, and people get all up in arms about it, and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Or if something little happens, they put it up. And really the only person benefiting from that are these influencers. And, they're not writing discourse. They're not creating culture. They're not intervening and they're not sparking conversations. They're just sparking outrage.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think unfortunately, that's a controversial opinion in these parts in a way. But Jared, I appreciate your time. Anything else you want to add before you go? Everyone should read Jared's article. Jared comes around. He puts together a great, I should actually pop this back up, your film rundown this week.
Yeah, and I think that this week's going to be a nice, interesting example of this, because you've got the new Pixar movie Elemental coming out. And there's already been dozens of articles about how Pixar's in trouble. And, it's a movie about immigration very clearly, and the elements, earth, fire, land, and air, and this anthropomorphic thing that happens when they're in this city, and it's about tolerance. And it's already been dismissed as a bomb at this point. This stuff doesn't work. I mean, the people that supposedly believe it aren't going to see these movies.
It seems like the Pixar movies, like I think I saw that one where it's like all the different emotions and things in the person's head. They've gotten increasingly kind of abstract in this very subversive, kind of scary way. I did not like that movie. I can't even remember what it was called. That movie felt like I was being emotionally manipulated. I did not trust what the filmmakers were trying to do to my head.
Yeah, but even that movie is interesting because that was Inside Out 8 years ago, and whether they knew it or not, kind of the undercurrent of that movie is how crappy it is to move to San Francisco, and what a terrible place it is.
Yeah.
There's that's what's happening, because the girl in that movie doesn't really like the community, and it's this awful place. So you're not going to see something like that in one of the more recent Pixar movies.
Yeah. Hey, but I know you got to run. I got Porter here sitting in the bullpen. I don't think you've met Porter before. Let's go ahead. Let's bring him up. Porter, what's up? Hey, you're muted. Oh no, I got you. You're good.
Hello, fellas. Coming to you live from a beautiful day, clinging to life on my Android phone.
Hell yeah. Was your battery fully charged?
No, it never is.
No, what's it on? 10%? You can't see
I think I got 30%, but it's all good. Sun is shining. Lots of fellas out here getting some work in, including myself.
Well, Jared, I'll Porter, I don't know if you met Jared before. Jared writes for us. Jared lives in Hickman. So yeah. Anyway, hey, Jared, I'm gonna kick you out. Me and Porter are gonna talk golf now.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, we'll see ya. All right, we're talking PGA Live, right? Is it LIV or Live?
I believe it is Live, as in the Roman numeral 54, which 54 holes, I guess.
Hey,
it's a very exciting week in golf. We got the U.S. Open out in California, and we're seeing how awful it was to select that course. The U.S. Open traditionally is held in a northeastern or upper Midwest area because that's where you get a lot of rain, and you need a lot of rain to grow thick rough and narrow the fairways. That's a classic U.S. Open setup. Then they've done the best they could out there at Los Angeles, but California not having a lot of rain, all the courses there are very, very hard, firm, and fast.
Right.
It was good to see Ricky Fowler post an 8 under number. Hopefully he can carry that into the week. But the drama does continue on from last week with the Live versus PGA thing.
What's the latest with that? So last week I called you because I knew that you knew the dynamics of this, and I was like, give me the skinny on the Live. And you told a very nice story about Greg Norman. Greg Norman, his efforts over decades to start an alternative to the PGA that was more global, and how the culmination of that work was Live, basically, or LIV.
Yeah, he's tried for a long time, and of course, Greg Norman having business interests around the world, including Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, of course, wanting to get into the American market.
Yeah.
They were a perfect match, and So where it's now at is Jay Monahan is of course on a medical leave of absence. We'll see what that entails, but
What do you mean?
it appears that there's this entity which will own and operate all three tours: PGA, Live, and the DP World Tour, or as many people know, the Euro Tour.
Uh-huh.
And so it is unclear sort of what Jay's role will be. If initially it was thought that he was going to be the main commissioner, I personally hope that does not happen. I hope the PGA players now sort of get together and vote him out or boycott him, or they've got to get him out of there. They've got to get a player commissioner. The PGA has not had a player commissioner since, I want to say, it was probably before Tim Fitcham. So it's got to be in the early 90s. They haven't had not a player commissioner in a long time, and it's about time to change that. And I think Tiger Woods is the guy. You got to vote him in.
Interesting. Tiger Woods, bring him back.
I think he'd make a great commissioner. I think he's
Porter,
got the respect of the players. He's got everybody.
I saw this. I figured we'll just kind of talk generally about golf. I saw this video the other day. I can't remember who. It was some instructor. He kind of looked like a hippie, long hair. I can't remember where I saw it, but he was talking about how when you're hitting a golf ball, the way you should think about it is throwing the club head down at the ball. And he claimed in the video, I haven't had a chance to try this out.
That's correct. You're putting the club in orbit around your body. So let me grab my 9-iron real quick. See if I can do this. So what you're really doing is you're taking this club and you're using your body and your arms to go put it in orbit around your body, and you are essentially throwing it at the club. You're not, this is not like a baseball swing where you are it's a little arm dominant, wrist dominant. You're using your body and your arms to sort of send this club around your body and deliver that head exactly where it started.
Right.
And I developed a drill out of necessity because I don't have time to come to the range anymore, where I take just a rug, like a shag rug from the dollar store, put it on the ground, put your club down on the ground, like so, and you just sweep it, just like that. You just sweep it over and over and over again. And I recommend that to everybody. The number one thing I think I see people have is contact with the ground. They either hit it way too fat, they take up way too much grass, or they just miss the ball altogether and whip it. And so practicing sweeping it helps you just pick the ball right up. Because as an amateur, all you're really trying to do is just pick the ball up, get it up in the air, and go hit it again. You're not really trying to, slam it. You're not really trying to put a ton of spin on it. I think what a lot of people do is they try to do what pros can do, and they end up having a very, very, very bad time.
Hey, you were talking. Who was that club pro? Was that the U.S. Open or a couple of weeks ago?
Michael Block.
Yeah. And there was this interview clip floating around where he kind of got some. I was going to curse, but I'm going to not curse. He got held over the coals. He got held over the coals because he said that the only thing that separates him from Rory McIlroy is length, how far he could hit his clubs, basically.
Well, to be fair, he did beat Rory McIlroy at the PGA. It didn't help him that he went out directly after that and shot a terrible score. But that's the difference between your club pro and your star. When the whole world's watching, let's see how good you are. There are a lot of great club pros, and one of the reasons why Live started was to give golfers a better schedule, because the professional golf tour is an unbelievable grind. There's no other pro sport like it. There's no other professional sport where you're on the road 50 weeks a year, 40 weeks a year away, and it's just an absolute grind. And I know everybody boo-hoo, they're millionaires. Well, they're not if they don't win. I think it was Monday Q, the Twitter account that posted this stat. I think it's like 60%, 50 to 60% of all professional golfers lose money. So it's a very brutal profession.
Yeah. And Live by all accounts has made it easier on players. right? I mean, shorter round.
Correct. I mean, it's done something that the PGA Tour's needed to do for a while. There's no reason why a tournament should be 4 rounds. No one watches the Thursday rounds. And also, you have guaranteed money for players, which goes toward travel expenses. A lot of guys live on credit cards. And you want to say, well, Dustin Johnson, he makes millions in endorsements money. Well, not the guy who's 150th, not the guy who's barely clinging on to his tour card, or the guys that are on the Corn Ferry Tour. So it's about time that some changes needed to be made to make this game, to make this game grow on a global level.
Yeah.
And a lot of the PGA Tour players are now finding out that their commissioner, the guy that they stuck by, stabbed him in the back. And, an old wise man from Texas once said, "Fool me once, fool me, you can't get fooled again." I think they're learning that out.
Yeah, that's a wise man that said that. I wonder who that was. Are you just knocking around at the range? You gonna play nine?
Yes, it's very ugly today. It's very, very poor. I haven't shot golf. I haven't really played in about a month. I'm trying to get back into it, trying to get my stuff grooved in. You really got to practice 5-10 minutes a day. Because if you practice, even if you're just swinging in the mirror, you have to. There's a term called greasing the groove, which I guess is a weightlifting term. But it's the same for golf as well. You got to keep that. You got to keep that groove, nice and dialed in, even if it's just swinging in your office or in front of a mirror. But yeah, maybe when I get back into form, I'll post some swing videos for you.
All right. Well, yeah, that sounds great. Hey, join us next week. Let's talk about. I noticed you've been talking a lot about scrap and timber. Maybe we talk about that.
I got you.
All right. Well, see you, Porter. All right, that was Porter. Porter's a friend. Just like to hear from him every now and then. He might be a recurring character. Porter's always got something fun going on. Well, that's our show for this week, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, as you know, it says right here, Davis Hines. I'm going to put on our background, and I'm going to play all off. So y'all all have a great weekend. I don't know when you're watching this. Maybe you watch this during the week, but have a good rest of your day at minimum. And we'll see you next week. Let me play the song. What should I play? Here we go. This is a good one.
Beep.